Hi, it's Joanna from missredfox Paper Art. Welcome to my channel. Okay, paper grain. What is it and why do you need to know about it when bookbinding? This is perhaps the most important information when you are serious about bookbinding, so make yourself a cup of tea or coffee, cheers, and continue to watch. Also, while you're here, feel free to like and subscribe if you are interested in making books and in paper crafts in general. My videos are all about these subjects. Thank you. So, let me explain paper grain to you. Most papers have grain. Imagine fibers like little sticks running along wood, like these ones, or the stems or branches of a plant. This is the same with a lot of papers, because paper is mostly made from wood or plants. Let me now tell you about the fabrication process of paper and how paper grain comes about. The main material for paper or cardboard is cellulose fibers, and they are extracted either from wood or from another plant like cotton, bamboo, mulberry, flax, hemp or daphne. Even sugarcane waste or straw are sometimes being used to make paper, and of course recycled paper is also used to make new paper. The fibers are then turned into a so-called pulp, which is a slurry made of broken down fibers or recycled paper and water, and sometimes chemicals are used as well. And for machine-made paper, like this one, the pulp is put on a belt and then fed into a roller, these cylinders here, and the belt vibrates and the fibers lay into a direction. So this direction is called the grain. The fact that the water in the pulp also runs along the belt like a river forces the fibers even more to align in one direction. That would look more or less like this. The fibers are in one direction, and this would be the grain of the paper. There is a so-called long grain, which means that the grain is parallel to the long edges of the paper, so like this. Or the short grain, which means that the grain is parallel to the short edges of the paper, so like this. But we have some special cases too. Special case number 1, recycled papers. They have shorter and weaker fibers, since the fibers in the original paper pieces are broken down during the pulping process, but it still has grain. This is a piece of paper, a recycled paper that I bought, and this is a piece of paper that I made myself using little pieces of paper, water, and a kitchen fruit processor that I don't use for food anymore. And with this, we come to special case number 2, handmade papers. They also have quite a weak grain or even none at all. This is because when paper is made by hand, the fibers arrange themselves randomly. Let me show you. Like this. Each fiber goes in another direction. Lokta paper from Nepal or the Kahari paper from the Himalaya, both made of daphne plant, usually don't have grain. They and also the Japanese chiogami paper, like this one, are made using bamboo screens, which you have to move in all directions so that the pulp is evenly distributed. For smaller paper sheets, you can do that by hand, but for larger ones, the screens are attached by strings. So to conclude, when paper is made by a machine, the fibers are aligned in one direction. But when paper is made by hand, like these ones, the fibers go in which direction they please or only align slightly. So, how to tell the paper grain direction? To explain, here are sushi rolling mats. I really love sushi and sometimes I make them myself. So this is why I have the mats at home. You can see that the bamboo sticks all run in one direction, here like this and here like this. Imagine them like the grain in the paper. So if you think this mat is a piece of paper, or this one, the paper grain would be in the direction of those sticks. It's easier to fold in one direction, the direction of the grain. Here like this and here like this. If you try to fold them the other way, the sticks, so the fibers in the paper, could break. So it's easier like this, but you can't do it like this. Sometimes it's easier to tell the grain direction with thicker materials like board. If the piece is large enough, you only must bend it and see what's easier. Here and here is not so easy. So the grain direction would be like this. Here it's not so easy, but like this you can see it's easier. So this would be the grain direction. Sometimes you can even see the grain direction if you look at the paper against the light. I'll demonstrate later. If you don't see the direction while looking at the paper against the light, you can try to easily fold the paper or the cardboard. Barely fold it in half and don't crease, like this or like this, and see where it's folding easier, where you have less resistance. The paper grain runs parallel to that direction. So this, it's not so easy, but this is easy. So the paper grain would be like this. For very thin paper or too small pieces, it's sometimes difficult to tell. So you then make the cut test. You cut at the corner of the paper in both directions, like this and like this, and damp the paper. Why this works? When paper gets moisture, like water or glue, the fibers are moving apart and then the paper is lifting. So you can see one piece is like this, but the other one is quite curved. The piece that stays flatter, this one, is the one running parallel with the grain direction. And the piece that warps more runs perpendicular on the grain. So again like this. And we made this test and we saw that this is the paper grain. Also, ripping the paper is much easier in one direction than the other. So this is quite easy, but like this, not. So a smooth, clean rip, an easy rip means that your rip is parallel to the grain, and an irregular one means that your rip goes against the grain. Sometimes it's written on the packaging of the paper if you have a long grain, so parallel to the long edge, or a short grain, parallel to the short edge. In English, the abbreviations would be LG for long grain and SG for short grain. And in German, by the way, SB for Schmalbahn or BB for Breitbahn. But I made the experience that you usually get questioning faces when you ask about the paper grain in the shops, if these shops are not entirely specialized on paper or on bookbinding, and if you buy loose paper which is not marked accordingly. A little bonus info. Book cloth or book linen also has a grain direction because it sometimes has a paper backing, like here, but also because woven fabric, which is made of, has a grain direction too. You can see it here. You can find the grain of the book cloth by bending it like you do with a paper sheet. Well, here's difficult because this is already rolled. But I find the grain direction of the cloth is not so critical in bookmaking, except perhaps the case when you cover the boards completely in book cloth. A special case are Japanese and Nepalese papers when wanting to tell the grain direction. You can either make the cut and damp test and see which piece curls or warps more, or make the fold test and see where you have less resistance, or you can look at the paper against the light and find the long vertical lines which are parallel to the grain. I'll turn this on. You can see these lines here. These are the paper grain. And if I take a Nepalese piece of paper, Lokta, you can see that the fibers are randomly distributed. There or here. They are even thicker here than here. And this is this Kahari paper made of daphne as well. You can see the fibers very good. You could see the lines in this Japanese geogami paper because this paper was made by hand using bamboo screens. But some modern geogami papers are machine made and like this one, and you won't see the bamboo lines of the screen, so the paper grain. If none of these tests work, damp test, the cut test, the fold test or the light test, you probably have paper with very weak or no grain at all, so you can use it in which direction you wish. This would be the example for traditionally handmade Nepalese Lokta paper. As you could see before with a light test, they generally lack a distinct grain. They are handmade, so the long blend fibers arrange themselves randomly when the paper is made. The lack of grain makes the paper stronger and more flexible, but there is a downside to it. I find that it can be difficult to get a sharp crease or even to fold the paper properly. Now, you probably ask yourself after so much technical stuff, why is paper grain important? Why would I care? Why do I need to pay attention to grain direction in bookbinding? The answer is that by respecting a grain direction and aligning it correctly, you have the foundation for a strong book. Grain is an important matter when making the book covers. When you add glue, so moisture, to cardboard and paper, they expand, the fibers expand and then contract again when drying. If you don't align the grain correctly, you'll have warping covers. I'll show you later. Moreover, for close binding like this, you'll have an even pool between book block, so the pages, the end papers, and the cover. If the papers and the cardboard have the grain in the same direction, which is usually parallel to the spine, then the pool is very even and you have a strong book. For open spine bindings like the Coptic one here, or the Japanese one here, you'll have an even pool between cardboard, the cover paper, and the end paper if you align the grain correctly. So if you pay attention to have everything in the same direction. But if your covers have corners or edges that are lifting or warping, like here, I'll show you. See, there is a gap between the cover and the paper, so it's not aligned properly, so it's warping. Then you've probably mixed the grain. So either the cardboard or the cover paper or the end paper don't have magic paper grain. So one goes in one direction and the other one in the other direction. So the pull they have is stronger and eventually the cover begins to warp. When you organize your pages in the so-called signatures and don't use loose sheets like with the Japanese binding and use the paper grain correctly, your books will open more easily. But if you make and sew, so punch with the needle your signatures against the grain, this would eventually cause the pages to buckle. So here, for example, I think they are against the grain, so this is why they don't lie flat. If you use book cloth, like here, you can align not only the grain of your cardboard with the grain of your paper and of the end paper, but also with that of the book cloth. I must admit that I didn't pay much attention on paper grain earlier, or even when knowing all the facts. Sometimes I just try to maximize a piece of cardboard or paper, so I cut them in order to get more pieces out of them instead of respecting the grain, which would possibly give me fewer pieces. So this would be like cutting with the grain, and I would have 3 pieces, and these are the same size. Here I would have 4 pieces, but it would be against the grain. So this one would help me when making a vertical book, and here would be nice if I would have a landscape format. But yeah, this is what I mean, cutting with the grain or against the grain. And like this, I ended up with the odd warped notebook or buckled signatures, which is a pity, and I can only use the book myself then, and I'm not able to sell them. So learn from my mistakes. To repeat, how to use the knowledge about paper grain. If you make signatures for your book, like here, and don't use loose sheets like for the Japanese binding, find the grain and fold the paper with the grain. There's not so much strain on the paper through the folding if you fold with the grain, and then you have no breaks and no cracks. I'll demonstrate with this little piece of thin cardboard. So if I fold with the grain, like here, it is much easier, but if I fold against the grain, it doesn't look nice and I have cracks and eventually breaks in my paper. You could, of course, fix that by creasing against the grain with a bone folder. Then it would fold easier. You won't have so much resistance, but it is better to fold with the grain. If you cover your book completely in paper and don't use book cloth or book linen and use the paper for the hinge too, your book and the hinge could strain much faster if your paper for the covers is used against the grain, so not parallel to the spine in the hinge. Also, you need to match the grain direction of the paper to that of the cardboard so your covers don't warp. Okay, my coffee mug is empty. This is what it looks like, by the way. And this is more or less everything I know about paper grain and how to use it in bookbinding. I'm curious to hear if this, or at least part of it, was new to you, and I'd be happy to hear if you know even more or different things about this topic. Let me know in the comments. In the next video, I'll talk about the different papers I like to use for bookbinding and also which ones I don't recommend, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you liked this video, and if so, please like and subscribe, and I'll be back with more videos on bookbinding and paper crafting soon. If you have any questions, just write them down in the comments and I'll answer them as fast as I can. Thank you so much.